Ladies and gentlemen,
The most transformative sport event on earth is about to begin.
Those who are in the stadium are on their feet.
It's just a long, niggly climb.
Because it is desperation now. And there it is.
Gold! What a result! Another remarkable athlete about to write another chapter in Paralympic history.
Quiet, please. Hey.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. If you love the games, we are the show for you. I am your host, Jill Jarris, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello, how are you?
We have had such an Alison-themed string of shows lately. We did para ice hockey. We did a couple of my favorites that I found from Sydney. Loved our last
Yes.
Sydney episode. And now we're doing more wheelchair rugby. I mean,
Happy
come on.
co-host, happy life. Happy show, happy co-host, happy show.
I love people crashing into one another. Yes!
Yes, we are talking wheelchair rugby today. We've got Dr. Thomas Rietveld back to chat with us about the reassessment of classification system for female players, which could change rules and stuff like that. Dr. Rietveld is a research associate in wheeled sports and technology at the Peter Harrison Center for Disability Sport at the University of Loughborough. He and Professor Vicky Tolfrey were tasked by World Wheelchair Rugby to reassess the classification system for female players in order to get more females involved with the sport. Fascinating stuff. Take a listen.
Dr. Rietveld, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to talk wheelchair rugby. As listeners know, I'm kind of obsessed, so anytime I get to talk about this sport is a good day for me. So, came across this absolutely fascinating research that you did. Start with describing how this came to be.
Well, I think it was 2022 when we got in contact with GB Wheelchair Rugby, but also World Wheelchair Rugby. And World Wheelchair Rugby wants to increase the participation of women in wheelchair rugby, because I think that it's about 5% now, and they want to obviously increase that and get more women into the sport. Well, here at Loughborough University, we've got a long-standing collaboration with World Wheelchair Rugby, and working at the Peter Harrison Center for Disability Sports, there has been a lot of research going on in all the wheelchair sports, and wheelchair rugby is one of the main sports in that. And yeah, that's how it all started, actually. Yeah.
So let's talk about the point system a little bit for wheelchair rugby. So the players on the court have a certain number of points, but in the past they've gotten a bonus for having a woman. How does that work?
Yeah, so I think that rule came into place in 2011, if I do it on top of my head. And the idea behind that was to increase female participation. And that was mainly driven behind the fact that women are, well, less strong than their men counterparts. And since wheelchair rugby involves a lot of crashing into one another and trying to divert someone on and off the court, it's quite influenced by strength as a factor. And to compensate a team for putting a female on court, they were allowed half a point extra as a team total per female on court.
But that half point, there was no reason for it, in the sense of there was no reason, let's just make it half a point. It just sort of, they pulled it out of the air.
Well, I wouldn't say they pulled it out of the air, but it's definitely something that they've given some thought to, and they've spoken to a lot of people before they implemented those rule changes back then. But it's not that there was any research behind that. It was just based on the fact, like the general knowledge of that women are less strong than men are, which you can see in the entire population. So their assumption was, since it influences people on a daily life basis, and normally we make a distinction between sports with women and sports with men, and since this is a mixed-sex sport, they just thought it wasn't fair to do it like that.
Your research seemed to want to quantify that half point. Is it accurate? So was this more wheelchair rugby's idea, more your idea, or kind of a combination of the two?
Well, it was mainly driven by wheelchair rugby. We just facilitated the research behind it and discussed with classifiers, but also with other researchers to come up with a protocol how to test the strength difference between men and women. And in the past, let's say 10, 15 years, there's been quite a bit of research in wheelchair rugby, but it's all dominated by men. And if there was some research involved with women included in the study, then sometimes they actually excluded those women from the data analysis just because there's such a difference between men and women. So that's a pity, and that's the gap that we wanted to fill. So that's why we started the research that we did.
Okay, so let's talk about what that protocol was. What did you actually do with these female rugby players?
Well, since wheelchair rugby is played with your upper body, so you're using the muscles in your arms and your trunk, we for now mainly focused on testing the strength of the elbow and the shoulders. We spoke to our technical department to get a portable strength rig because we wanted to do the testing at a tournament, because it's easier to go to a tournament and test players than to get all the players into the lab, especially if you want to get a group of international players. So the technical department at our university built a strength rig, and that just means that there's the force transducer, and you can pull on the force transducer on one end, and then it measures the force that you're producing. So what we did is we did some elbow and shoulder strength testing. We wanted to do some trunk testing as well, but it's quite difficult to do that in a standardized way if you need to bring a portable device. So we kind of did that using what we call a push and a pull test. So it's still a strength gauge, but the strength gauge is connected to your wheelchair, and you try to push as hard as you can. So actually, it's quite sport specific test, and that involves the trunk, but it also involves the muscles in the arms as well. So it's not an isolated trunk test, but it kind of measures trunk in a way. And alongside those strength tests, we also did a sprint test on court. So they did a 10-meter sprint on court, and we measured the time at the 2-meter point as well to get a bit of an idea of what the acceleration was.
What's a force transducer?
Yeah, how do I explain that? It measures the force that you can produce, but yeah, the whole mechanics behind it, I'm not entirely sure how to explain that.
Fair enough. But what does the athlete have to do to use this device, and what does it kind of look like?
Yeah, so what it looks like is basically you put your wrist or your upper arm into a strap, and you try to pull or push against that strap as hard as you can. So you try to be in a stable position. So you try to sit as still as possible. For example, if we try to test the elbow flexion strength, then we put a strap around the wrist, and then you try to push or you try to pull as hard as you can.
How many women agreed to be lab rats for you?
I think in total there were 27, and that seems like a low number in a lot of research, but for a Paralympic sport, 27 wheelchair athletes is actually quite an impressive number, especially if you talk about the women total wheelchair rugby population, which I think if we look at the database, there are around 1,300 wheelchair rugby players which are registered. And like I said, about 5% of that is probably females. So 27 is probably around 40% of the entire wheelchair rugby female population.
So what'd you find?
So what we found is that, well, like we expected, that women are a lot less strong than their male counterparts. But if we looked at the different classification levels, then you could actually see that if you've got less function, then there are less differences between men and women, which kind of makes sense, because if you don't have any triceps function, for example, and you compare someone without tricep functions with a counterpart who also doesn't have tricep function, then you won't find much difference. While if someone has a lot of function, so if you look at the high point players and then especially the 3.5s, which still have quite a lot of muscle strength, depending on their impairment type, of course, then we saw a big difference between men and women. So there was a big difference between men and women for the high point players, and for the low point players, we saw differences, but they were not as big as for the high point players, which makes sense,
So,
I guess.
yeah, makes sense. If you don't have upper body strength, you don't have upper body strength. Gender doesn't matter in that scenario.
Yeah.
So in wheelchair rugby, players are classified 0.5 through 3.5. So what was your cutoff as? What was that point that the difference mattered and the difference didn't matter?
Yeah, so the cutoff point was between 1.5 and 2. So if you are classified as a 2 or higher, then the differences were bigger or larger compared to the points underneath. But the interesting thing actually was that if we looked at the sprint testing, so if we didn't look at the strength testing, but if we looked at the sprint testing, then there weren't any significant differences between men and women on both groups. And that could have to do with the smaller groups that you encounter. And if you test a few more, that you might find a significant difference because it's close to significance. It's always difficult to say. But that actually means that if we purely look at the sprinting capacities, then they could actually compete with their male counterparts in a way. Then the interesting fact is as well is that a lot of the women are, well, less heavy than their men counterparts. And if you correct for body mass, which is typically done as well, because then you kind of look at the impact that you can make. So if you make a sprint and you're sprinting against someone and someone tries to drift you off to one side or the other, but someone is 50 kilos and your other person is 80 kilos, then you can put a lot more weight into it. So in research, we've got a term which is called sprint momentum, which kind of combines the body mass of the athlete with the sprint capacity of the athlete and gives a bit more of a realistic variable, I guess.
And that sprint test is really important when you're talking wheelchair rugby, because that's what they're, a lot of the game is how fast can you get yourself down the court?
Yeah. So it's also interesting from a tactical perspective. So if you are a coach and you've got a high point female player in your squad and you want to use them to their full potential, then you might actually argue that it's good to protect that athlete to make them do that sprint and use the full potential of that player.
I don't know if you know the answer to this. Would a player that weighs a lot less also have a wheelchair that weighs a lot less, or all the wheelchairs roughly the same weight?
Well, all the wheelchairs are roughly the same weight, but if you if you look at a sport like wheelchair rugby, the chairs are a lot heavier compared to other sports, and that's mainly because of that impact. And you want to be able to make that impact as well. They're not as heavy as they used to, like years ago. Although if you if you look at a lot of the day chairs as well, it's sometimes quite brutal that some people are still pushing around in heavy chairs, which you don't want to see. But no, I don't think that makes a massive difference. But yeah, it definitely it has an influence on your acceleration as well. If you're heavier, it's a lot more difficult to accelerate. So you could maybe divert someone a bit easier or make a bigger impact, but it will surely have an influence on other parts of the game.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, with so few women playing the sport, you have just the chair is the chair, and we've designed this chair. It's mostly for men. If more females get involved with the sport, do they start developing chairs that are more specifically for females?
That's actually a valid point. And I don't think that's addressed in a lot of sports. And you see the trend going on with, well, shoes, for example, as well. Shoes were always developed for men, and you see it in football or soccer, as you call it in the States, that the developers are now looking more and more into specific characteristics for women as well. So that might make sense. But then again, I think in a sport like wheelchair rugby, but actually all the wheelchair sports, all these chairs are different, and all these chairs are already individualized in a certain way. So from that sense, I think you already made a few adaptations when you're a woman compared to when you're a man, because you individualized it to your own chair. But there's indeed still some bits to win in that area.
World Wheelchair Rugby really jumped on your research in the sense of they made some big changes. So what was their initial response when this came to them?
I would say the initial results that we presented were in, I think, near the end of 2023. And they thought it was quite interesting to see that there were a lot bigger differences in the high point group compared to the low point group. And we didn't give them any direction of what they should do. We just advised them that if that there are differences between the high point and the low point players, and that there might potentially be an argument that you need to compensate them in a different way. But we also said to them, that's up to you. It's not our decision to make any judgment or any changes in any rules. But they were actually convinced that it would have a major influence, and now they had some research to back up the thoughts that they already had. So the fact that women were compensated in the game had some research behind it now, but they took it to another level by also making a difference between a high point player and a low point player. And they implemented those rules since the start of January, but that's also as a trial period. So this year is used as a trial to see how it works. And we're actually already discussing with World Wheelchair Rugby if there's a way to, and I think that working group is working on that as well, to see what the perspectives are of the players, of coaches, of support staff, of classifiers as well, to see what they actually think of the rules and if it makes an impact. Yeah, and just to get the perspective from the players, because I know it can have an impact on players. Yeah.
So higher point players, I'm going to see if I get this right, will now get a 1 point bonus as opposed to a half point bonus for being a woman on your court.
Yeah.
So you get even more leeway
Yeah.
by adding women onto your team. What has been the response from players? What have you heard?
Well, it's always difficult to judge on that because there's always a few who have a very loud voice, and there's always people who don't agree with changes that are made. But like I said, we're currently evaluating what the actual perspectives are of players and coaches, and we're discussing with World Wheelchair Rugby as well how to do that in the best way. So there are some qualitative researchers involved in that as well who usually do like semi-structured interviews with coaches and players and support staff to get their perspectives. But it's a difficult one because usually the people who agree to take part in such interviews are the ones that want to show their voice. And it's also the reason behind changing the rules is also to get more females or women into the game. So there's a lot of voices outside of the sport that they want to attract into the sport. And if you still have the players that are currently playing, it's always difficult because they never like if they're threatened for their position, which makes sense because if I were a player as well and it would mean I get less court time, I wouldn't be happy. But yeah, we try to make the sport as fair as possible. And we as researchers, we try to support in every way we can, but we just give advice and it's up to the sport what they do with that advice.
Dr. Rietveld, you're being very diplomatic. and saying some people didn't like your results. What was fun about working with the wheelchair rugby players? Or not fun? You don't have to be diplomatic. You can say what a pain in the neck they were.
No, to be honest with you, I always like doing the testing part. And I got into research in Paralympic sports or adapted sports, and especially focused on wheelchair sports, just because I like to work with this population, because it gives me a lot of joy to see that people are active and people are trying to push themselves to a limit in a sport that they can play. I actually quite liked the research and working with the players. Of course, it's sometimes quite difficult to recruit, and some players or coaches are a lot more difficult than others. But in general, I think the responses were quite well received. Yeah. And I think this is just a start, and we should do a lot more in this area. Like I said, we just focused on arm strength for now, but I still think we should look at trunk strength as well. And those are all like standardized movements alongside the game, but it would be interesting to look at the actual gameplay metrics as well. Just because I know we can do a lot during tracking, during gameplay, not only with performance analysis using videos, but also tracking using little sensors which you can put on a chair to see what their velocities and rotations and impact during hits looks like from a women and a man's perspective. Hopefully this is just a start, and there's a lot of new areas to explore as well, but that all depends on funding as well. And it's a small sport, and the fact that we were able to do this was already, a big step forward, but it's only a small step. I think there's still a lot of steps to make to actually build on that evidence, because that's what you want in the end.
Do you have any of the women you tested go, oh no, I got to go hit the weights now?
Yeah, I think there were a few who were a bit hesitant, and yeah, well, you will always have that. But most of them were lovely and were quite happy to do any testing in the future if needed. But it's also about giving back to the sports. That's what a lot of these women said as well. I just want to make it a bit better as well, for not only for me but also for the next generation. Yeah.
What research is next for you? Are you doing more follow-up on this?
Yeah, like what we currently try to set up is a bit more of a qualitative research to track the actual responses of the players and coaches and support staff, but also to look at, because the rule change that they did in January, that the women's rule change was just one of the rule changes. They had a few more which were a bit more like time based. So I think there were a few more. I can't recall them from top of my head, but there were a few more changes that they made, and I want to track those changes throughout this year to see if it actually made an influence on the game. So compare some video footage from this year during Europeans or the American variant of Europeans and make a comparison to last year. But it's also gathering that data from tournaments like last year tournaments or the years before. But usually there are a few countries who make some video footage of almost every match. So I'm sure we'll get a head start with that soon.
Jill, I'm immediately thinking I clearly got into the wrong field. I could be watching wheelchair rugby all day as my job.
Yeah, but you would never want the research to end. That would, I mean.
This is true. I'll just research this forever. Are you able to take your scientist hat off? Like during Paris, were you able to just watch wheelchair rugby as a fan?
Well, although I'm working in the UK, I come from the Netherlands, and we hope to be at the Paralympics next time. We actually did quite decent at the Europeans this year, but there's still a long way to go to get to the Paralympics. But the Paralympics were an amazing experience, and just being in the stadium in Paris was unbelievable, because the atmosphere was what it didn't matter if France was playing or any other team. The atmosphere in that arena was magnificent, and of course you're supporting the GB team if you're there with your GB colleagues as well. But I think we did, as a GB team, they did really well, but the final was just amazing to see. I actually thought that USA were gonna dominate that game after that first quarter, and I think no one would have predicted that Japan would, well, get back so strong.
Japan just outplayed them,
Yeah.
right? It was so amazing to be there. And do you still hear the music in your head from that stadium?
Yeah, it's not only that stadium. I've been to wheelchair basketball as well, and that was crazy. And I still have the Champs-Élysées song in my head that they kept on playing in that stadium.
Well, I'm glad you got to wheelchair basketball because your Netherlands flag really got to fly.
Yeah. Our Dutch women are doing very, very well in wheelchair basketball, and the men, they didn't win like the women, but I still thought they played pretty well as well. Yeah, I actually went to one of those games. I think it was against Spain, if I recall, but they lost it in one of the quarters, and then game was done. And they actually played quite decent, but it was just one quarter that they just lost focus. But it was an amazing experience, and if we can get an atmosphere like we had in Paris, in LA as well, which I hope we do, then I think the Paralympics are in a good place.
What did I not ask about the research that you want people to know about?
Ooh, that's a good one.
You can take your absolute nerdiest take on little tiny tidbits that got you excited as you were going through the research.
Well, I actually, we spoke about the strength testing, we spoke about the sprint testing as well. I'm just excited to do any follow-up testing. I'm excited to do follow-up research on this. But like I said, it's all dependent on finances and getting grants and getting the support from the university. And well, like I said, there's still lots to explore. And well, my personal preference is still in tracking the athletes during a game, because that just excites me, because I my background is a bit more in wheelchair tennis, and we used to put little sensors on the chair that make you track the chairs on their velocities and the rotations during a game. And to make a study like that and compare women to men during gameplay, that would be a really interesting one to look at. So it's a lot of exciting new research opportunities, but you will always keep that at the end of a research. It's always talking about what can we do in the future and what can we do better. But like I said at the start, there's still so much to explore.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rietveld. We also talked with Dr. Rietveld about his research on wheelchair tennis. If you missed that, that was part of our episode with Charlie Cooper in June, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. And you can find more about the Peter Harrison Center for Disability Sport at lboro.ac.uk/research/PHC. We will have a link to that in the show notes as well. How do you feel about the whole new system?
Okay, so first of all, we need to talk about how Dr. Rietveld was so sweet because we ended up having to do the interview twice.
Yes.
And which means he had to talk to me on my own the first time. And what a brave man he was, because then he came back and you were there to monitor me and make sure I behaved appropriately. So thank you so much, Dr. Rietveld, for technical difficulties and coming back twice. Anything that gets more people playing wheelchair rugby is great in my eyes. And we talk a lot on this show about gender equity and making things fair and making sure more women participate. And let's get behind the science of making things fair and improving gender equity. And wheelchair rugby has actually been very progressive in terms of getting more women. I mean, I know in Tokyo, every team had a woman. And I think only one team in Paris didn't have a woman. We talked about it on the daily shows during Paris, but Australia had 3 women on its Paralympic team. So we're seeing it slowly. And now with this rule, I think teams actually will pursue it more because they see how it works.
Right. Do you think there will be eventually enough for men's and women's? Kind of like para ice hockey?
I can only hope, because then I get to watch twice as many games. That I think is going to take a while because every sport has to grow slowly in a way. but this is so much fun. Oh my goodness. This is the best sport ever. I don't know how I lived my life before I discovered wheelchair rugby, honestly. That was a sad, lonely life before I had that. Like, every time I watch it, I feel better about the world, which we need right now, right? Yeah,
We
people
do need
crashing
that.
into each other make me feel better about the world. But there's so much joy in that sport, and it's so good. World Wheelchair Rugby, I will do commercials for you any time.
You know what else we have time for?
Time to vote.
It is time to vote. It's time once again to choose the next historic Olympics and Paralympics that we will cover in our history shows for 2026. As per usual, we do anniversaries. Next year is a winter year because we did summer this year. So the choices are Torino 2006, Innsbruck 1976, Cortina d'Ampezzo 1956, and Garmisch-Partenkirchen 1936. So you can vote at our Facebook group, that's Keep the Flame Alive podcast group, or send us a message on Instagram at Flame Alive Pod to decide which games we'll cover in our history episodes next year. If you are not on social media, you can always email us at flamealivepod.com or leave us a voicemail. That's 208-FLAME-IT. And we will take your votes that way. Voting is going to end October 1st. So get those votes in. It is very close right now.
It is very close. I voted.
I saw that.
And then I also put another Facebook post on my personal Facebook saying, please go vote, but don't vote for this one. So I think I changed somebody's vote with my lobbying. So yeah, it is very close. We're very excited about this one.
So yes, don't forget to vote. Voting ends October 1. You decide what we get to do with our historic time next year.
Vado a fare campere.
Wow. What does that mean?
That means I'm going shopping.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. So yes, Milan Cortina is starting to come out with more and more news. Very exciting. The first official stores are opening. They are both in Milano. One is on the Via Luca Beltrami, and the other is Milano San Babila at the Piazza San Babila. They are open every day from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. right now. They will have clothing, accessories, pins, mascots, a collection created by Salomon, which is one of their licensees, that will have apparel and winter sports equipment. If you want to pay by credit card, they only take Visa. They also take cash. So you got two options there. Neither of these will be the mega store. The mega store is going to be in the Piazza Duomo, right in the center of the city, opening in the next couple of months. We will keep an eye on that. Very exciting that the stores are coming, because those mascots are so cute.
Milo and Tina are our friends.
The IOC has announced that it's going to have a neutral athlete program again for athletes from Russia and Belarus, basically the same as Paris. They've got their flag, they've got their anthem. There's a committee that decides who gets to go. You know, they have to qualify if the sport allows them to qualify. Not all sports are allowing athletes to come in.
No teams.
No teams. So
unfortunately, there are going to be figure skaters.
Yeah.
Because they had the last qualification figure skating competition last week. And we got two women from Russia who qualified, one man. And you know what that means? Eteri Tutbaritsa has a skater in the women's competition.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy. Oh, boy. Well, we'll see how that plays out. Gonna be interesting.
Tell me something happy, Jill.
NBC has announced that they've got their hosts for the opening ceremonies. That will be this time Savannah Guthrie and Terry Gannon. Terry Gannon, you might recognize his voice, American listeners, because he does figure skating commentary with Tara Lipinski and Johnny Weir. And then Sean White's going to be part of the broadcasting team. I believe he'll come in on the Parade of Nations. Mike Tirico will have a part in this. Not sure what he's going to do. He'll add something, but he is going to be in the U.S. in San Francisco for the Super Bowl, which also is the same time. This happened in Beijing as well, where he had double duty, but I believe he did do double duty for this. And this year it's kind of like, nah, we're not doing that. What do you think?
Savannah Guthrie is a favorite. I think
Okay.
I think she's done very well in the past. Terry Gannon, not my favorite, but I think can be very good in this role.
Yeah, I think he is a very good commentator,
Yes.
but he doesn't necessarily he's very neutral commentator.
Which
He's got that neutral voice.
Which, given the opening ceremonies, we've had some bad ceremony commentators who just say absolutely ridiculous and offensive things. And I don't think we're going to get that with Guthrie and Gannon. I think we're in safe hands. Shaun White is actually the wild card in all of this because, we've seen him certainly in talk shows and on different, and he can be very mature and very insightful. And then he can be the flying tomato. So I think it's going to be fun. We won't get to see him. We'll have to record it and watch it later. But yeah, so listeners, you're going to have to tell us how NBC handles this, which will be fun.
Right, and having them in San Siro, which coincidentally is having its 100th anniversary around the time of the opening ceremonies. So prepare for that to be a big deal. I wouldn't be surprised if the city does a lot to commemorate that, but I think they'll be mentioning it a lot on the show too.
Welcome to TKFLASTAN.
It is the time of the show where we check in with our team Keep the Flame Alive. These are past guests and listeners of the show who make up the citizenship of our very own country, TKFLASTAN. And it's amazing we didn't have LA 2028 news with another sponsor. I will say that.
They took a week off to let us catch our breath.
Right from Milano to TKFLASTAN. First up,
a little bit of news from the end of the World Athletics Championships. Evan Dunphy sustained a bad hamstring tear during his 35-kilometer gold medal race, and he had to drop out of the 20K. And he did post video of when it happens in the race. So if you want to be even more amazed by Evan's gold medal, he did that last portion of the race. I don't think being able to feel this, like half of his body.
Wow. It's incredible. I saw some interview with him on CBC, which was great. And he talked about the prize money. He got $70,000 US for that gold medal. And he's like, this is life-changing money for me. And it's true for a lot of athletes that it is life-changing money, particularly if you're an athlete where you get one event and you have one chance. Like I thought about Katie Moon. And granted, she's got a Nike contract and she's had a really good season, but that big payday at the end is super valuable for a lot of athletes. It was a fun World Athletics Championships.
And honestly, that could not have happened to a nicer person than Evan Dunphy.
Yes.
So we are thrilled when the TKFLASTANis succeed and get the recognition that they deserve.
Yes, and TKFLASTAN, thank you for talking about it on the Facebook group because that was so much fun. It was just a whirlwind of events every day, and it was fun to chat with you all.
We didn't have this in the show notes, but Kenny Bednarek was on the relay team for the 4x100.
Oh, was he?
Yes, he was on the U.S. men's team that won gold.
Yay, Kenny! Redemption.
And he ended up with silver in the 200.
Yes.
I think last show we hadn't finished it.
Right. So yeah, that was tough. He, by a very, very tiny margin, lost gold in the 200, but redemption in the relay, we'll take it. Josh Williamson, TKFLASTANi number 1, was officially named to the U.S. Bobsled World Cup team as a brakeman, and the Olympic team will be chosen from this World Cup team. They will be named on January 19th, 2026. So it is, how does the first part of the season go?
Ashley Farquharson, I apologize, Ashley, finished third at the Luge Push Championships here in the U.S.
Oh, yay.
Beach volleyball player Kelly Chang and her partner Molly Shaw won the Beach Pro Tour Elite 16 in João Pessoa, Brazil.
At the Badminton World Championships, Baiwen Zhang made it to the round of 32.
At the World Wrestling Champs, Alejandro Sancho got pulled in the repechage round, but did not make it out. You made me say repechage.
I'm Just realized it. You did a good job, though. You did a good job. And at the Para Swimming World Championships, it's been a fabulous meet for TKFLASTAN. Olivia Chambers won gold in the women's 100-meter breaststroke, SB13, and the women's 100-meter freestyle, S13. She also took fourth in the 100-meter butterfly, S13. Meanwhile, Jessica Long took sixth in the women's 400-meter freestyle, S8, fourth in the women's 100-meter fly, S8, and bronze in the women's 100-meter freestyle, S8.
I saw a cute little interview with Olivia because she's so sweet. And when I got to talk to her in Paris, so much fun and so young. But she was saying, she's so humble about the whole thing. She was like, yeah, I've been working really hard on my breaststroke. I'm like, I think so, Olivia, gold medalist. But yeah, congratulations. It's been a fun week.
You know what else is fun from this week? Our review of the week. I don't know what listeners. I don't know what's going to stay in and what's going to be taken out of this show. But if you wonder why we're just cracking ourselves up, it's because we have made a lot of flubs this week.
Oh, the mouth is not working. But Mr. Mojo Rises wrote on Apple Podcast that we are hands down the best Olympics podcast.
Top of the podium.
It's because we edit.
That's right. And if you'd like to hear your name here, leave us a review on your podcast app or check out the other ways to get in touch with us in the episode details, and we will maybe feature you as well. So thank you, Mr. Mojo Rises. That's touching my heart, making me feel good about my weird tongue today.
You made me say repashush. And as I mentioned on the Facebook group, I had to do that pole vault story. I did it again for Sydney. And apparently pole vault, repechage, reservoir, these are all words that are now on the Alison cannot say them on the show list.
Got another list to start. Countries you have made angry and words you cannot say. This is going to be good. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening.
And until next time, keep the flame alive.